I love making theories, so to anyone who knows me, it's no surprise that I also made theories for my favorite game, Blocktails. Judging by the fact you've hopefully read the title of the video, you should know what this theory is. My point is pretty simple and can be dumbed down to one sentence. The player and the mysterious figure are absolutely, undeniably the same person. Pre-rewrite there wasn't much evidence to support this, and while the rewrite removed some prior evidence I had, it gave me all the more reason to think this theory is true. I'll be starting with the pre-rewrite theory and moving to my updated Demo 5 theory later on. This is mainly for general convenience, but also because I don't want my prior reasoning to go to waste, and I think with the little evidence I was given back then, it sounds pretty smart. Before I get into it, I'll be abbreviating mysterious figure as mysfig for convenience again. Yeah, I think that's it. Starting off with the prologue, we can see clearly how mysfig's speech was formatted. They speak with some words spaced out, which is important to note. Terry goes on to wake up and says, "I remember you," and don't think old Terry's forgotten you either. He refers to both the player and mysfig in the same dark red color. Also, note the spaces between Terry referring to mysfig, because this is important later on. Right now, the evidence doesn't seem solid. These spaces can be written off as showing hatred, which is why I felt this theory didn't work. I had the same thought with the dark red, as Cruel King mentions places in red too. The difference is the type of red. A lot of phrases, people, or places will be referred to in a more vibrant red, while player and mysfig are referred to in a dark red. The player being referred to in dark red isn't shown much pre-rewrite, although there is one thing. Chapter 3 was, and still is, one of the most explicit ways this theory is implied, and I am, of course, referring to everyone's favorite boss, hatred. Constantly throughout the dream world, it is referred to in the same dark red. It speaks with these spaces mentioned prior and tries to convince the player to give in to their own hatred. The connection Chapter 3 has with evidence from the prologue and prior demos is undeniable, and with the theory of hatred infiltrating each sword and mysfig trying to delay the player's journey to build them in, this led me to believe that mysfig and hatred, and by extension the player, are all the same person. And this next piece of evidence might sound a bit stupid, because it is. I was really grasping on loose strings here. We all know the beloved Demo 4 secret boss, Finn McCall, with his amazingly low HP and his non-annoying attacks. Why did I rate this? He was basically the talk of Blocktails for a while, being the hardest boss to defeat. The evidence is simple. Defeating Finn McCall grants you the badge Converged Timelines. Now, why is this important? Well, player isn't from this time. They're from the future. The only other person who is from the future is mysfig. By making the connection with what Finn says, being Hud, you're the one messing with time, you can conclude that this badge alludes to player's circumstance. This made me think of how mysfig could be an alternate version of the player and the timelines of the two converged. This now brings up mysfig's motives. If we are to assume that mysfig is player, that means player never goes home, and if player never goes home, the person who is at fault is none other than David Baszucki. Mysfig's motive pre-rewrite was unclear, so I'll need to bring in rewrite lore for this to make sense. Quoting the cutscene that plays after entering the prologue, mysfig says, "Good, the chorus grows louder. The ones who wronged me will have their debts returned in full." It's unclear how anyone has wronged mysfig at this stage, but with this theory it makes perfect sense. Players being actively wronged by Shedletsky and the admins, being forced to go through practical hell to collect a few souls to go home. We know the player feels this through Demo 3, quoting Sorrow, "How could they? We're different. Our only options are to continue this quest to collect the source or remain an outcast for years to come." We also know players' desire to go home. It's clear throughout the story, but I will quote Greed for this, saying, "Tell us, is it really that selfish? Please forgive us, we just want to go back." And with many characters outwardly saying player seems angry or full of hate, for example Kyoko and Shedletsky, mysfig's motive now makes perfect sense. This leads me to believe that Converged Timelines alludes to how mysfig is player if they didn't go home. They're isolated from society, causing them to feel intense hatred, and overwhelmed by this feeling, they try and reverse what has already been done. Also, let's be real for a second, mysfig has to have a motive. There's no way a player would just try and kill a developer because they rolled out some shitty update. And this also makes perfect sense as to why mysfig was so infatuated with the retro toolbox, aka Time Machine. Now following through with my post-rewrite theory, sans the Converged Timelines badge, The evidence that has been dropped is player and mysfig being referred to in the same color. Mysfig is now referred to as hooded figure in a purple gradient. However, mysfig still speaks with spaces in their words. This can be combated with the point that griefer's speech is formatted the same way before becoming the bubonic plant, so text formatting now doesn't matter past hatred and player being the same. There's a cutscene upon entering the prologue where mysfig says the stage has shifted. Threads I once wove unraveled too soon. This is mostly self-explanatory, but if the connection isn't clear, I'm assuming these threads allude to mysfig from the past, aka player. The stage has quite literally shifted, where instead of being the hero, they are the villain. Chapter 1 and 2 don't offer much, which is where Chapter 3 comes in. Chapter 3 is where my main new points are. Also still annoyed you can't kill the turkey before talking to the kitchen with it now. The first thing to note is, throughout the dream world, the fake Builderman acts much like mysfig. Hatred constantly manipulates the player through its speech, or in other words, hatred acts like the visions both the Blackrock King and Griefer had seen upon wielding their respective swords. It tells the player to suppress their emotions and how the future will be affected if they don't do as told. This reminds me of the sword visions, where you're told of the future that's to come. It's supposed to create stress and delay how far the player can continue on. If we assume the theory of hatred being formed as soon as the wielder sees these visions, hatred acting like those visions makes perfect sense. Most people assume these visions are being inflicted on wielders by mysfig. I am most people. This makes it especially jarring that hatred acts like mysfig in a way, leading me on to my next point. As stated before, Kyoko, Shadlesky, and a few other characters explain that player seems much more angered than before. The player is given warnings not to give in to this emotion, which mysfig already has succumbed to. Anger is heavily tied to hatred, and with hatred and mysfig acting alike, this tells me that mysfig is so heavily consumed by their hatred that their mannerisms are controlled by it. My final point comes in, fittingly, the final demo, for now. Demo 5 doesn't bring about much new evidence apart from the massive elephant in the room. The full demo is mostly fighting, player being wronged, having people not trusting them despite Tillman himself trusting them, etc. My point comes from the final fight of the demo, Argyll. What he says left a big gap in the story. He could be referring to anything as he says this, but my interpretation is this. Argyll, seeing beyond their veil, may refer to the dominus mysfig wears. This could also refer to how they're pushing their hatred down, or the events of Chapter 3, but Argyll wouldn't know of this. The only people who do know about the events of Chapter 3 couldn't have told anyone about this. Mysfig themselves wouldn't know of the events unless they are the player, and as Argyll is dying, I doubt he's referring to this. He wants what he says to him. I believe continuing down this path is referring to the hatred and anger player is feeling. As it bubbles up to the surface, it's clear they're feeling overwhelmed, hence the name Overwhelmed Nirvana. Continuing down this path would be setting their fate in stone, making them the hooded figure as soon as they give in. By analyzing these prior quotes, see where it shall take you, what your comrades will think of you then, now refers to what mysfig is doing with this hatred they have bottled up. If Argyll recognizes the player from his conversations with mysfig and creates this connection, he is trying to say that mysfig's actions are the player's own, and their friends will no longer trust them so long as they find out. Concluding all the evidence, the resemblance is kind of uncanny. There are a few other theories of who the mysfig is, like Lear and mysfig being the same, or mysfig being involved with Noli. I'm excited to see other theories pop up and love to hear you guys' theories if you have any, so drop them in the comments and I'll make sure to read everyone. Basically, player is mysfig. But that's just a theory.
A game